By the end of this year, a rogue line of code in an autonomous AI agent could actually cost your company millions in server fees. And that's before you even realize it's running.
Yeah, it really is a terrifying prospect. I mean, for any executive, right?
Exactly. Like, what if the very automation you deploy to save your enterprise money, ends up consuming 3 to 5 times more compute resources than your standard software?
You invest in these brilliant autonomous systems thinking, well, I'm cutting operational bloat. And suddenly you are staring down a cloud computing bill that, I mean, it literally makes your CFO physically recoil.
Right. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a really essential roadmap from AetherLink.
Specifically, their insights on 2026 AI agent governance and FinOps strategies.
Yeah, and if you were an enterprise leader, maybe a CTO, or a developer who's evaluating AI adoption right now, consider this your survival guide.
We are definitely exploring the actual mechanics of the next era of automation here.
We are. We're drawing on AetherLink's expertise across their etherbot agents, EtherMIND strategy consulting, and their AetherDV implementations, because we are moving way, way past simple chatbots today.
Oh, absolutely. We really are. And to understand the urgency of this, you have to look at the massive architectural shift that's happening right now, like between 2024 and 2026.
It's a huge jump.
It is.
Yeah.
Think back to 2024. That era was really all about single-task AI tools.
Like just asking a chatbot a question, right?
Right, exactly. You ask a question, it gives you an answer. It was a one-to-one, highly reactive interaction. But 2026 is demanding multi-step orchestrated systems.
So we are talking about AI agents that act proactively and autonomously.
Yes. They navigate complex enterprise workflows, they make independent decisions, and critically, they spawn their own subtasks to accomplish a broader goal.
Without any human prompting at all.
Exactly. Completely on their own.
Which is wild. And the research we're looking at shows that by 2030, 45% of organizations will be orchestrating these kinds of agents at scale.
But here is the really jarring part. Right now, 45% of European organizations are completely unprepared for this transition.
Wow. Almost half. So if you are listening to this and you don't have the underlying architecture ready, these agents risk becoming isolated, wildly expensive digital dead-end islands.
That is the core issue right there. The shift from single tools to autonomous orchestration, well, it fundamentally changes your enterprise architecture.
An agent is no longer just some, cool application your marketing team keeps open in a browser tab.
No, not at all. It becomes the literal nervous system of your operations. It interacts with your databases, your security protocols, your external software vendors, everything.
Let's paint a picture of what this actually looks like on the ground so it's a bit more concrete.
Good idea.
The source gives a great example of a European manufacturing firm. So imagine you're managing product design. In the old days, which is literally like 2 years ago.
Right, ancient history.
Yeah, exactly. You might have humans manually stitching together outputs from, say, 5 different AI tools. But in an agent-first world, you deploy a design agent that just generates the concepts.
And then it automatically hands those concepts over to a compliance agent.
Right, which independently checks them against European Union material standards.
And then a cost agent jumps in. It pulls live supply chain data and runs optimization simulations.
And all of this happens completely autonomously before a human arbiter ever even steps in to review the final trade-offs.
It sounds like absolute magic, doesn't it?
It really does. But I know there's a catch.
Oh, there's a catch. What's fascinating here is the dark side of that exact capability, because it sounds perfect until you actually look under the hood.
Right, the Deloitte 2025 AI governance report we cited in our notes.
Exactly. That report points out that 68% of European enterprises lack documented AI governance frameworks that are actually suitable for an agent-first world.
68%. That is a massive operational blind spot.
It really is.
But wait, if 68% of companies have no framework, what are their developers actually doing right now? Are they just buying API keys on company credit cards and letting these experimental agents loose on internal servers?
Honestly, yes, that is precisely what is happening, and it manifests in a few highly destructive ways. The first one is what we call shadow AI.
Shadow AI, that sounds ominous.
It is. This is when business units or, overly enthusiastic developers deploy these agents entirely hidden from IT or compliance teams.
So they're creating these orphan, invisible systems that are just operating in the dark.
Exactly. And then, because of that, you get audit gaps.
Okay. What does that look like?
Well, imagine an agent making a high-risk decision, like a loan approval in finance or a safety-critical action in that manufacturing example we just used.
Right.
But there's absolutely no paper trail of how it weighted the variables to make that decision.
Oh, wow. So you have no idea why it did what it did.
None. And finally, you have data spillage. Because these agents act autonomously, they move laterally through your network.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. If you have inadequate access controls, an agent optimizing a marketing campaign might, like, accidentally pull in and expose personally identifiable information from an HR database.
Yikes. But, okay, practically speaking, let me push back on this a bit.
Sure.
How does a developer actually build at the speed of modern innovation if they have to log every single subagent they spawn?
This is a common complaint.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, doesn't adding a massive governance framework or bringing in some AI lead architect just grind development to a halt? It sounds like we're taking our most rapid-fire technology and wrapping it in layers of bureaucratic red tape.
It's a completely valid concern, and honestly, it's the #1 pushback from engineering teams. But the reality is that governance actually enables scale.
How so?
Well, if you treat AI agents as tactical plug-and-play tools rather than massive architectural decisions, you will just drown in cascading technical debt by 2027.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
The solution here is what AetherLink calls governance by design. It doesn't mean stopping development. It means building a proper environment.
Okay, but how does that environment mechanically work, though? Like, on a practical level?
It starts with an agent registry. Think of it like an air traffic control tower for your enterprise network.
Yeah.
You can't just have 500 planes take off whenever they feel like it and fly at whatever altitude they want.
Right, that would be a disaster.
Exactly. The registry is the control tower that knows exactly which agent is in the air, what its computational fuel limits are, who owns it, and crucially, which database runways it is allowed to land on.
So that enforces least privilege access.
Precisely. Meaning an agent only ever sees the specific data it absolutely needs to complete its single task. So it's not red tape. It's the guardrails that let your developers drive at 150 miles an hour without flying off a cliff.
That makes a lot of sense. So if these shadow agents are currently running wild without that air traffic control tower.
Which they are in a lot of places.
Right. And they're constantly spawning subtasks and trying to optimize workflows in the dark. What happens to the compute bill?
It absolutely explodes. Let's dig into that Gartner report we mentioned at the start.
The one about the costs?
Yes. Unmanaged AI agent deployments consume 3 to 5 times more compute resources than equivalent single-task AI.
3 to 5 times. That is a staggering multiplier. Mechanically, why is the consumption so much higher?
Well, it comes down to continuous orchestration. Every single time an agent thinks, decides, or acts, it is making a call to a large language model via an API.
Right, and those calls cost money.
And if those agents are unoptimized, those calls just cascade. Plus, you have the massive burden of unoptimized RAG.
Wait, when you say AUG, you're talking retrieval augmented generation.
Right, it's exactly.
Basically, when we let the AI loose in our own private databases to pull specific context so it doesn't just, hallucinate an answer.
That is correct. But pulling that context is not just a simple keyword search. To do ARG effectively, the system uses vector databases and embedding models.
Let's break that down for the listener. Why does that burn so much compute power?
Because an embedding model is doing incredibly heavy math. It takes human language, say, a massive internal company manual,
Okay.
and it translates it into multidimensional geometric coordinates. It literally plots words as points in space so the machine can calculate the mathematical proximity between concepts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and doing that requires immense processing power. If an agent isn't given strict boundaries, it will just keep looping, recalculating geometric vectors, constantly refreshing data, and calling expensive LLMs forever to try and perfect a single task.
It's basically like giving a corporate credit card to an overly enthusiastic intern, right?
That is a great way to put it.
And then that intern realizes they have the power to clone themselves 50 times to get the job done faster. Suddenly, you don't just have one intern buying a coffee. You have 50 interns maxing out 50 corporate credit cards simultaneously, all because nobody set a spending limit.
That is the perfect visual for what is happening inside these enterprise networks. It's called agent spawning.
Agent spawning.
Yeah. Agents delegating to subagents without any depth limits, which creates exponential resource consumption. This creates a severe FinOps or financial operations crisis.
Okay, so how do we rein in the army of interns then? What are the actual FinOps strategies AetherLink recommends to stop this massive hemorrhage of compute?
The source outlines a few critical mechanical strategies,
Yeah.
but first is model tiering.
Model tiering, how does that work?
Well, you do not need to use your most expensive heavy reasoning LLM like a top-tier GPT or Claude model to do a really simple task,
Like what?
like formatting a JSON document or checking basic syntax. Instead, you build a routing system that sends those basic tasks to a tiny, lightweight, open-source model.
I see.
You reserve the massive, expensive APIs strictly for complex, reasoning-heavy decisions.
So basically, don't rent a supercomputer to do basic arithmetic.
Precisely. Now, the second strategy is prompt caching. This one is brilliant for efficiency.
How does caching actually work on a server level, though?
Think of prompt caching like a highly efficient restaurant kitchen. If 50 customers order the exact same complicated soup, the chef doesn't make 50 individual pots from scratch, chopping new vegetables every single time.
Right, they make one massive batch and serve from it.
Exactly. Prompt caching works the exact same way for AI. If your agents are asking the same underlying questions of your database hundreds of times a day, the AI stores the expensive mathematical computations from the very first request.
Oh, that makes sense.
So when the next agent asks the same thing, the server just bypasses the heavy math and serves that exact same batch of computed data. This single strategy can reduce token consumption by 40 to 60%.
40 to 60%. That is a massive discount just for having the system remember what it already calculated.
It is huge. And finally, you have agent lifecycle management.
Which is what?
This is where you set hard depth limits and termination conditions right in your code. You literally program the agent with a rule.
Like a cutoff point.
Yeah, like, if you haven't solved this problem in 5 steps, stop and ask a human. Do not spawn a 6th subagent.
And the real-world impact of this architecture is pretty undeniable. I mean, organizations implementing these exact FinOps strategies report 35 to 50% cost reductions.
Without losing any performance quality either.
Right. They are just cutting out the invisible looping waste. But uncontrolled loops don't just drain the budget.
No, they don't.
What happens when a regulator asks why a building's structural design was changed, and your answer is just, well, I don't know, my agent did it.
And that brings us to the external pressures, which are arguably way more dangerous than the internal costs.
Yeah, let's talk about the EU AI Act.
Right. The new EU AI Act becomes fully effective around 2025 and 2026. And it imposes incredibly strict regulatory requirements on what it classifies as high-risk domains.
High risk meaning what exactly?
We're talking about AI deployed in hiring, critical infrastructure, safety systems, finance, and public administration.
So things that directly impact human lives, safety, and livelihoods.
Yes. And the regulatory non-negotiables are heavy here. You must have documented risk assessments before deployment. You must have continuous human oversight, meaning a human can always interrupt or override the agent.
Okay.
And crucially, you must have explainability.
Explainability, meaning you have to show your work.
Exactly. If an autonomous agent denies someone a mortgage or alters a manufacturing tolerance, you have to be able to pull a log and explain the exact variable weights that led to that decision.
And what happens to a company that fails to provide that log?
Non-compliance risks fines of up to 6% of your global revenue.
Wait, 6% of global revenue?
Yes.
That is an existential threat to most enterprises. Let's ground this threat with a practical deep dive into the AetherLink case study provided in our sources.
The architecture firm, right?
Yeah, they worked with a mid-sized architecture firm based in Eindhoven. This firm had deployed a system of AI agents for building information modeling, or BIM.
Right.
These are the highly complex, multi-layered digital representations of physical buildings.
It is a perfect example of the danger of unmanaged orchestration.
So the Eindhoven firm had agents doing structural validation, checking sustainability impacts against Dutch law, and running cost estimates. But they hit a massive wall.
What happened?
Well, they experienced massive API cost overruns due to agent looping. And far worse, they realized they had zero audit trails for design decisions that were literally safety critical.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The agents were independently altering load-bearing structural choices just to optimize for cost, and nobody could prove how or why those choices were made.
Which is completely terrifying from a liability standpoint.
Absolutely.
So AetherLink came in with their AetherMIND consulting approach to fundamentally re-architect the system. They started with the agent registry we talked about earlier.
The air traffic control tower.
Right. They analyzed the structural validation agent and officially classified it as high risk within the registry. By putting it in that taxonomy, they hard-coded a requirement that any deviation in structural integrity legally required a human engineer's cryptographic sign-off before the agent could proceed.
So they literally built the control tower for the firm.
They did. And then they tackled the FinOps side by implementing model tiering. Before AetherLink stepped in, the firm's agents were querying a massive, expensive reasoning model just to check if a local municipal building code PDF had updated its formatting.
That is such a waste of compute.
Right. It was burning thousands of tokens a minute on a basic reading task. AetherLink routed those basic syntax and document checks to a tiny, cheap model.
Reserving the big guns for the important stuff.
Exactly. They reserved the expensive reasoning model exclusively for the final physics and structural load validations.
The results detailed here are phenomenal. By logging every decision into an immutable audit trail and fixing the model routing, they dropped their API costs by 45%.
Wow.
Overall, it was a 38% cost reduction for the entire BIM system, and they achieved 0 compliance incidents.
That's incredible.
The source even notes they now use their fully auditable EU AI Act compliant AI process as a competitive selling point to win new municipal clients.
It really is a complete turnaround from a massive liability to a core business asset.
But I mean, if I am running a mid-sized European enterprise right now, I'm looking at this Eindhoven example and thinking, I simply cannot afford to hire a 10-person team of full-time, highly specialized AI architects to build this kind of taxonomy and routing infrastructure.
It is prohibitively expensive to hire that level of talent full-time. That's assuming you can even find them amidst the current global talent shortage.
Right. So what do?
The text introduces a highly pragmatic operational solution here: fractional AI leadership.
Okay, let's break down how that actually functions for a business.
Well, if you look at the LinkedIn 2025 jobs report, it shows a 340% year-over-year growth in searches for fractional AI leaders across Europe.
340%, that's massive.
It is. A fractional leader is a senior, battle-tested expert, like the architects at AetherLink, that you bring in for perhaps 10 to 20 hours a week. Instead of putting them on the permanent payroll, AetherMIND uses this model to conduct a comprehensive readiness scan across 5 distinct dimensions.
Could you walk us through those 5 dimensions?
Certainly. First, they evaluate technical readiness. Like, is your data actually clean enough for an agent to read?
Makes sense.
Second is governance maturity. Do you have an agent registry built? Third is skills. Can your current developers actually manage these systems?
Right.
Fourth is compliance posture. Are you violating the EU AI Act right now? And finally, cost management. Are your agents looping and burning compute?
So they really look under the hood.
They do. They review your AWS or Azure bills, interview your engineers, and map the entire architecture. They identify the critical gaps. Once those gaps are known, you retain that fractional expertise just long enough to build the foundational blueprint, write the agent taxonomy, and set up the FinOps controls.
So it's like you bring in the master structural engineer to dig the foundation, pour the concrete, and set the load-bearing pillars of your skyscraper.
That's a great analogy.
And once that framework is rock solid, your internal development team can just take over and safely build the rest of the floors on top of it. You don't need the master engineer on the payroll forever, but if you don't use them at the very beginning, the whole building collapses.
That is the exact mechanism. You secure enterprise-grade expertise without the bloated corporate overhead, and you ensure you aren't deploying a system that will trigger a massive regulatory audit on day one.
So, bringing all of this together, if there is one core takeaway you need to absorb from this deep dive into EtherLink's roadmap, it's this. AI agents are massive architectural decisions.
Absolutely.
They are not plug-and-play tactical tools you just download from a web store. You cannot just buy a subscription, hand over a database key, turn them loose, and hope for the best. You have to actively design the environment they live in.
And my core takeaway is that compliance and FinOps simply cannot be retrofitted.
You have to do it from the start.
Yes. You cannot wait until your cloud server bill is 5 times over budget, or a European regulator is knocking at your door demanding an audit trail to start thinking about governance. High-risk decisions require built-in, hard-coded audit logs and human override capabilities from the very first line of code.
The stakes are just too high.
They are. If you do not build the brakes before you build the engine, your enterprise will face both crippling compute bills and devastating regulatory fines.
It really requires a profound shift in how we think about software development entirely.
It does. And actually, I will leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as we move toward 2026.
Okay, let's hear it.
We have spent this entire discussion talking about managing our own internal agents. keeping our own enterprise house in order, right?
Right.
But what happens to your governance frameworks, your security protocols, and your audit trails when your company's autonomous enterprise agent has to negotiate a complex, multi-million-dollar supply chain contract directly with another company's autonomous agent?
Oh, wow. 50 of your interns with corporate credit cards arguing with 50 of their interns at the speed of light, constantly rewriting contract clauses.
Yes, Zach.
That is a completely different universe of orchestration.
It is the immediate future. And only the organizations with mature, ironclad governance by design will survive that level of autonomous interaction.
A daunting but absolutely necessary reality check to end on. If you want to ensure your agents are building the skyscraper and not just burning down the budget, we have got you covered. For more AI insights, visit etherlink.ai.